Fire Department is hosting a campus safety fair on Wednesday, August 16th at 10 a.m. at Pine Manor College. And this program will include an on- and off-campus fire safety presentation. Residents, advisors, parents of high school and college-age students, and all students who are touring and attending colleges are invited and encouraged to attend. For more information, visit the town's website. And we're now about, halfway through the Commonwealth Avenue project, right on the edge of town, and actually it affects a little touch of the border, though in terms of the construction, but the impacts are broader, and we're surviving. The Mass Pike is now back up to 4 lanes in each direction, so that's good. But Common Avenue is still closed for, another week or so.
Yeah. And the BU Bridge is also closed. So.
But I will tell you that I live only 3 blocks from Common Ave, and it actually hasn't been too terrible. I've avoided it because I know, I don't want to get caught up in it, but the times that I could not avoid it, it hasn't been as bad as I thought it would be. The most annoying thing is not being able to use the BU Bridge.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
That will end soon.
This too shall pass, and hopefully at the end of it we'll have a safer, more secure structure that'll last us another at least 50 years.
Well, we're going to come back and do the same thing next summer. The other side of Common Ave. So.
Right. Don't get too used to it.
Yeah.
Any other announcements?
I think Selectman Hamilton and I want to bring some publicity to the fact that the Override Study Committee, which is going to kick off this fall, is now accepting applications. So any members of the public that are interested in serving on the 2017 Override Study Committee, applications are available on the town website, and we encourage everybody to apply, and we'll be doing interviews, I think, shortly after Labor Day, and kicking off the committee shortly thereafter.
Yeah, we also put a general advertisement out for applicants for town boards and commissions, and I know we're getting a bunch of applications in, which is great because this volunteer form of government only operates if people actually volunteer. So it's we need people to volunteer. And we have some very interesting boards and commissions doing great work, making a difference in Brookline, and you can be part of that. So any other things? Let's delve into it. I didn't say that this is the Selectmen's meeting for Tuesday, August 8th, and our next scheduled meeting after this is September 5th, the day after Labor Day. So this is our only meeting in the month of August. So, so we have a jam-packed agenda. Maybe we'll be here a long time. I hope not.
I drank my 5-hour energy drink, just in case.
Okay. So we have the minutes for July 25th. Anyone have any modifications? I handed mine in to...
I had some slight modifications as well.
I did too.
Okay, so I'll move that we approve the minutes as amended for July 25th, 2017. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Oh, do we have public comment? Okay. Thank you. Next item is...
Did you want to make a comment? Did you want to make a comment, please?
Not yet.
Okay.
I will.
Okay.
The next item is question of authorizing the chair to execute an assignment, an assumption agreement between Motivate International, Motivate Mass, LLC, and the town of Brookline. This relates to the town's participation in the Hubway system.
Yay!
Ms. Viola, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Joe Viola, Assistant Director for Community Planning. As the board, as you recall, I was here in May asking for your approval to execute a contract with Motivate International, Inc. on a 5-year contract to be the town and the system's Hubway bicycle share system operator. Per language in that agreement with Motivate can assign the contract to a corporate affiliate with the consent of all 4 of the Hubway municipalities. Once we consent to that, their affiliate will essentially continue to operate the system as it does. It'll be a seamless transition from Motivate International to Motivate Massachusetts LLC. Just for the board's information, town council from 4 municipalities did due diligence, and the document before you for review and approval was jointly authored, reviewed, and approved by council from the 4 municipalities. The language ensures that Motivate International, Inc. and its affiliate, Motivate Massachusetts LLC, are fully liable for the performance of all obligations required under the terms of the contract. And I would just note that prior to this evening, they've already sought and received consent to assign the agreement from Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville. And due to our summer schedule, we're a bit behind.
So we're the last municipality?
Yes.
Okay. So how's it going with the Hubway this year?
Good. It's taken us all some getting used to with the new system, but we're all looking forward to expansion. We think we have a good partner, and look forward to good things to come, especially with Brookline expanding next year.
So the expansion would be
Likely for
season.
next April, yes.
Okay. So we shouldn't be expecting new stations this season.
It'll be incremental. We'll be eventually, I believe, 13 stations, but next year, I believe, we'll be up to 9 stations. And 2 years from now, we'll be up to hopefully
And
the full
how's
13.
the siting decision going to occur?
To be discussed. I think the Bicycle Advisory Committee, myself, Motivate, we've all started to look at new potential locations. The Bicycle Advisory Committee will meet eventually to shortlist and talk about how expansion should occur. But we have a number of areas identified, and feel very confident that we'll begin to address the need to fill in between the 4 stations we have now and the rest of the system. I think it'll be a great benefit to riders in Brookline.
Okay. Any questions, comments from the board?
I would just say, we were talking about the ComAv project earlier, that I'm not sure exactly who was the decision, but they did create a temporary station at ComAv to facilitate travel along the corridor.
They did, and ridership it's been, I think we had one of the best months and best days ever for ridership, probably, in good part due to that project, so. But it was definitely helped to fill in the gap between the other Hubway, bus, subway, and other systems that were temporarily out of commission due to that project, so.
I'll note that as we talk about expansion that's baked into this contract, I think we as a community are always open to partnering with large employers and institutions in town for them to take a site to further enhance and expand our Hubway network. So anybody that may be watching or interested, I encourage you to contact the town to try and partner with us for a station.
First come, first serve.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll move that we authorize the chair to execute an assignment and assumption agreement between Motivate International, Motivate Massachusetts, LLC, and the town of Brookline. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green. Aye. Selectman Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Great, thank you very much.
And next item is a question of accepting a grant in the amount of $49.94 from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency to provide funds for training and education for the Community Emergency Response Team.
Good evening.
Chief O'Leary.
Good evening. This grant is to provide training for our CERT team. As you know, our CERT team is very active in town. We have over 150 members. They're all volunteers. Each one of them has gone through the 10-week training program at minimum, and we use them for call-outs on a lot of things, such as snowstorms. Anytime we activate a shelter, they'll run the shelter. I know that We've taken a walk along the marathon route. This year, we had 2 shelters up and running. They were staffed for, I think, 10 hours by members of the CERT team. And there's still interest in town about people inquiring about how we're going to do the training, when we're going to set it up. And this money here will allow us to run one more class, and I know we'll fill the class up and get it underway. And we usually do about 20 residents of the town at a time. So it's a worthwhile program.
Any questions on the grant? I'd like to just take this opportunity with Chief O'Leary here to just, it's not on the agenda, but I'd like to talk about something that's kind of current in the world of policing, and that has to do with some statements by the President of the United States before an audience in Suffolk County, New York, where he seemed to encourage the police to do things that we might perceive as brutality. And I'd like to state my opinion, and I believe it's the opinion of the chief, and I hope it's the opinion of the rest of the board, that I, and hopefully we, in no way condone that kind of activity by our police department, that we have a policy of treating all individuals with respect, and I would go so far, I never thought I would use this word pertaining to a statement by the President of the United States, is to go so far as to repudiate his statement. So that's, do you have a comment on that, Chief?
Sure I do. I heard the same remarks, like I think everybody did, and I cringed the minute I heard it. And the first thought that came to my mind is that's wrong. The second thought was you just made our job a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Because what we do is we treat everybody as respectfully as possible. And to say that you can rough people up and say that you can put them in a car in a certain way that they accidentally bang their head is not proper police work. And that's not how we operate here in Brookline. And I'd like to reiterate that we have a lot of trainings that we undergo. We have a lot of discussions internally in the building. We don't tolerate people abusing prisoners or any other people, as you can see from our track record, and you see from what you see on the citizen complaints. That is not an issue that we have a problem with here in town. We don't want to do anything that can kind of make some people think that if they come in and they get arrested by a Brookline police officer, or any police officer for that matter, that they're going to get roughed up, because that only makes the police job harder, more difficult, and probably a little bit more dangerous for the police officer.
Yeah, I'd like to add, the comments were just shocking and frightening. It was an attack on primarily black and Hispanic people to give red meat to who the president perceives as his base. However, something else happened there, and that was the shameful response by the police there. A police department that is under surveillance by the Justice Department, at least it used to be, and has a number of issues, including from their response and that shameful statement by the president, a lack of discipline, just lack of discipline and ability to understand what their role is within a democratic society where they are not occupied but rather part of the community. But I'd also like to note one thing, an irony here, and that is, hate is indivisible. And one of the things that the president said was, push him into the paddy wagon, right? That's a slur on any Irish cop in this country. So, the cops who cheered on, the president and his racist attacks against, in my opinion, black and Hispanic people, were also cheering on his indivisible hatred of pretty much anyone, and allowing, a slur on Irish people I mean, I know that from, when I was a youth. I mean, what paddy wagon means is very clear. And allow that slur to be published for the world. I think that's, it's another part of this that we shouldn't forget. So. And I also, like you said, we don't have those issues here. I think one of the reasons why is that, we've developed some policies and procedures that give guidance to police as to how to deal with difficult situations. And I think you've developed a fairly disciplined police force that hopefully won't have or won't behave in the way that we saw in New York. So.
Right. Thank you.
Yes.
I'll just add that, I totally agree with both Neil Wyshynski and Bernard Green have said, and it is a shameful tactic on the president's part. It's hurtful, and it's scary. I'm reminded what he said today about the fury are going to come down on the North Koreans, and I mean he's escalating every situation in which there could be some disagreements or divisions or racially biased opinion, and it's scary. It's very, very scary. What makes me wonder whether we need to do something a little more proactive in terms of assuring people in Brookline that we have no intention of allowing people to behave in this way or encouraging this behavior. I don't know how that happened, how we would do that. Haven't thought it out, but it just occurs to me that, we want to make it clear.
Well, one of the things that is in place, and you heard passing reference to this, is the fact that there is a formal procedure laid out for citizen complaints, and anybody who feels aggrieved or like they've been mistreated is free to file, in fact encouraged to file a citizen complaint either at the police department or in the Board of Selectmen's office. And those complaints and allegations are investigated aggressively, and the final reports are seen by this board. So there is active and engaged citizen oversight of the conduct of our police officers. And I think the chief said it absolutely correctly when he said, thankfully, there is not a track record of these issues despite the fact that we are so aggressive and on top of the investigating of any complaints that are filed.
Okay, so this, I was about to, okay. What's before us is the acceptance of a grant, but I thought, being that this is our first opportunity to meet with Chief O'Leary, that I think it was good for me and us to take this opportunity to, and the chief, to take this opportunity to reinforce Brookline's policies and Brookline's values in this area. So I'll move that we accept the grant in the amount of $49.94 for the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency to provide funds for training and education for the Community Emergency Response Team, CERT. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thanks. And we have 3 appropriation transfers, and this is in the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. It's a total of $4,900.
$5,000.
$5,000.
Austin Faison, Assistant Town Administrator. Good evening. Dr. Gelano can't be with us tonight, so we have been going over this appropriation transfer for about a week now. It essentially stems from an oversight of the budget creation process. It was an early request concerning moving some of the money out of professional technical services, but we didn't completely specify where that money would move. So This request came early in the year because he did delineate what he would rather allocate that money towards, and moving forward with the creation of the fiscal 19 budget, these amounts will be taken into account and budgeted properly going forward.
Okay, so I'll move, any questions, comments? I'll move that we approve 3 appropriation transfers within the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations, $3,100 to education, $400 to professional dues, $1,500 to meals and reception, and this is coming from professional technology. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Yeah,
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next item, Commissioner Papister, Mr. Ditto, is approving the final balancing change order for sewer system rehab in the amount of $179,689.14.
Good evening.
Mr. Ditto.
This contract's complete, and with that comes some housekeeping, of which this is one. The balancing change order of $179,000 is basically made up of 5 different items, of which the most expensive was the cost to relay a sewer from in Park Street, from Beacon Street to Marion Street. The minute we started in that project, it seemed to be doomed. We excavated and ran into rising concrete and cased conduit. From there, we dug a little deeper and bumped into the National Grid's gas line, which was ancient and started leaking right on the spot. We had to shut down, call Grid in, and have them replace that pipe. That took about 3 weeks. Then we started back up again, digging some more, and ran into a water pipe. So I don't think there was anything left to bump into in that case. But anyway, we got it in, backfilled it, and that was $81,000. Also was the fact that we had to relay the town water main, and that was $53,000. And the third largest one was...
Well, that was an expensive street.
Yeah, that portion of it certainly was. Down at Amory and Dummer Street, we discovered that there was some high bacteria counts in the storm drain. We tested the water coming out, and there was some fecal contamination. We looked at the sanitary sewer coming down Dummer Street, and lo and behold, there was a huge crack that was exfiltrating sewage and finding its way into the storm drain. So we immediately lined that pipe, and that worked really well. We stopped that cold, but that ran $38,000. So those were the big hits on the change orders. The overall contract was for $2.2 million, of which basically 2 items in it made up was $1.8 million, and that's that we lined approximately 19,000 feet of various size sewer mains, and we also epoxy coated 1,500 vertical feet of manholes. So it was, in the end, it was a great project. We got a lot done. You don't see much of it because it's mostly under the ground, but it was money well spent.
Okay. Questions, comments?
So the sewage draining into the storm drains was emptying out into what, the Muddy River or Charles?
That goes into the Charles River.
So fixing that is a huge...
Oh, it's huge. Because we'd go down there every 3 months and do bacterial testing, and sometimes it would be high and sometimes it was low. We couldn't really put our finger on it, so we actually ran a camera in the line, and you could see the wastewater dumping into the storm drain.
So this is the nagging question, like Park Street. I presume the utilities aren't so carefully mapped out on drawings.
The record drawings weren't accurate that we used to prepare the plans. It was
Do you
right
know
from the
how that
beginning.
happened? Do you know how?
We don't. Until you actually use these plans to locate something, you wouldn't know.
Okay.
I mean, this is a huge sum of money. I feel obliged to say that I think it's less than 10% of the overall contract, so.
No, I'm not complaining
I'm-
about the amount of money.
I'm just putting it in
I'm
context.
not complaining about anything.
That $200,000 is nothing to sneeze at, but this is a $2.25 million project.
Right.
So,
Where you're working underground, you never know what you're going to find.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I get it.
I'm assuming that any gas leaks on Park Street were hereby fixed.
Say the least.
Good.
Okay, I'll move that we approve the final balancing change order for the sewer system rehab in the amount of $179,689.14. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And next item is approving a payment in the amount of $19,829 to Mario Suzie for the repaving of Park Street, more Park Street.
Hey, I live there, thank you.
So this is the paving of Park Street. We felt that, we had Mario Susi on board. He does our street patching contractor, and we had good prices for him, so we had him go forward with milling and overlaying of Park Street, again, from Beacon to Marion. And that's a more than fair price, and the project came out great.
Any questions, comments? I'll move that we approve the payment in the amount of $19,829.72 to Mario Susi for the paving of Park Street, repaving Park Street. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a number of temporary licenses, and I'll move them in omnibus fashion, and I believe there's a couple that are pending police approval. I think we got at least one of them. So if you can just...
I will,
okay.
yeah.
Keep me straight.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll move that we approve temporary extension of operating hours to Vine Ripe Grill for a surprise birthday party to be held on Saturday, September 16th.
Not a surprise anymore.
Right. I was thinking that when I was reading it. But we're not saying for who.
That's right. Everyone knows when their birthday is.
That could be my...
I'd love to know what the pretext is now. So it's September 16th, 1 a.m. at 1281 West Roxbury Parkway. The contract, the closing time on Saturdays is normally 11 p.m. I'll also move that we grant a temporary wine and malt beverage sales license to Pine Manor College for corporate summer outing to be held on Friday, August 18th from 3 to 8 at 400 Heath Street. And this one is could be pending police approval. So this approval would be contingent on that question of granting 4 permits, two, I think it's 4 permits to sell all kinds of alcoholic beverage, non-sales, to Lars Anderson Auto Museum at 15 Newton Street as follows. A wedding reception to be held on Saturday, August 12th from 5 to 11. Corporate dinner to be held on Wednesday, August 30th from 6 to 10. For a wedding reception to be held on Saturday, September 2nd from 4:30 to 11. And a wedding reception to be held on Sunday, September 3rd from 5:30 to 11. And that too is contingent on police approval. I'll also move that we grant a temporary all kinds of alcohol sales license to Hellenic Association of Boston, doing business as Annunciation Greek Orthodox Cathedral of New England, for a wedding reception to be held on Saturday, September 2nd, from 5 to 12 at 162 Goddard Street, pending police approval. And lastly, I move that we grant a temporary all kinds of alcoholic beverage sales license to Pine Manor College for a wedding to be held on September 3rd, from 5:30 to 10:30 at 400 Heath Street, and that too is pending police approval. All those in favor of all those motions, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton.
Aye. Although I have a question. What happens if the police do not approve?
Then
They don't have the event.
they don't have the event.
Okay.
You need to vote.
Oh, and the chair votes aye.
And for the edification of my colleagues and the public, the police has signed off on and granted approval for all the events except for items J and K, which are the Saturday, September 2nd event at the Annunciation Greek Orthodox Cathedral and the September 3rd event at Pine Manor College.
They just haven't gotten to them yet.
They just haven't yet anticipated, but not yet received.
Okay, delving into our calendar, we have a few personnel items, and the first one is the police department, and this is filling of E911 dispatch vacancy. Chief O'Leary, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me back.
If you want to fill the position, you better be back.
Yes, yes. One of our dispatchers who's been with us for a couple of years left to take the same type of job in another community. She basically took it because it's a day job in the other community, and she was working nights here, and that was easier for her. So she left, or she will be leaving, and we're creating a vacancy. We do have a hiring process underway because about a month or two ago, you gave authorization to hire one that we're anticipating coming up in September when the dispatcher leaves to get on the fire department. So we do have people in the pipeline, and we'll be able to hire them and get them, the two people that you're going to, one approval tonight, one you already approved, into the dispatcher academy that takes place in the beginning of October. So I'd like to move forward with this, and when we do one hiring the same night, so if we could.
Okay. And you're, of course, taking efforts to attract the diverse applicant pool?
Yes, yes.
I know that-
We've been posting it. We put it out on the police department website, the town's website. It's been posted on the CJIS computer that goes to all of the area police and fire departments that we have this opening.
I take it this is the Public Safety Division, or what division is this?
It's a public safety dispatch center. They'll be responsible for dispatching police, fire, and felon ambulance.
But it's in the Public Safety Division? Or am I?
Yeah, it's the combined dispatch center.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? I'll therefore move that we authorize the filling of the E911 dispatch vacancy in the police department. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, so this is filling the vacancy caused by the town administrator stealing your star employee. So this is the question of filling the administrative technology resource coordinator vacancy in
Don't
the...
talk about that too much.
Yes, thank you, Kevin Stokes, Chief Information Officer. You just took all my thunder away. I was hoping to play that card, but you actually took that away from me. Yes, we've regretted the loss of Ms. Orsini, and she's on to bigger and better things, but at this point, we're in dire need of having our new administrative person in the office to help us move our organization forward.
Okay. Any questions or comments? I presume you are making efforts to attract a diverse, broad workforce?
Absolutely. In fact, working very closely with the HR department, I'm told that this actually will get advertised over 65 different networks, in terms of their pipeline and their channels to widely distribute this job advertisement, excuse me.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
I just wish you luck in finding someone as good as Stephanie.
Thank you very much. I'm up for the challenge.
So I'll move that we authorize the filling of the Administrative Technology Resource Coordinator vacancy in the Information Technology Department. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
And next up is Library. You have two two vacancies, a librarian 2, assistant print supervisor, and a library assistant 2. Ms. Lemon.
Hi, Sarah Slyman, Library Director. Thank you for having me this evening. We have 2 positions that I need authorization for, if you please. The Assistant Branch Supervisor of the Coolidge Corner Library retired after many years of faithful service to the town. And full-time Library Assistant 2, also at Coolidge Corner, who has been with the town for a very long time, is also retiring. So I would appreciate authorization to replace both of those valued employees.
Okay, and I presume you two are,
So we post everywhere that HR recommends, and I usually give them a list as well, including library networks like the Mass Board of Library Commissioners, the Simmons Job List, the Rutgers University School of Library and Information Science. We also are going to post nationally on the ALA job list, the American Library Association, and with the Chinese American Library Association and the Black Caucus of the American Library Association.
okay. Any questions or comments? I'll move that we approve the filling of the following 2 vacancies in the Library Department, Librarian 2, Assistant Branch Supervisor in Coolidge Corner, and the Library Assistant 2. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you very much. Happy summer.
Thank you. And next up is Commissioner Pap Sturgeon, and this is filling a vacancy as the Assistant Recycling Coordinator in the Public Works Department. Mr. Pap Sturgeon.
As we were developing the new hybrid page throw system, we realized that we needed some additional help. So as we were planning the FY18 budget, we did request or acknowledge the need for a new position called the Assistant Recycling Coordinator, which would assist our environmental health supervisor in all of the programs, all of our sanitation programs, particularly the commercial recycling program that was mandated by town meeting several years ago and has been underway, handling our residential recycling program and overseeing the contractor. But there's much more to this position as well. We also have an additional need for enforcement in the Public Works Department to assist with enforcement. This position will be doing education and enforcement of the commercial establishments for recycling. It'll be assisting in the implementation of future solid waste and recycling programs. It'll be providing assistance in enforcing all of the bylaws that Public Works uses as tools today, including illegal dumping and enforcement of all of our sanitation regulations, and also enforcement of snow and ice regulations in the wintertime, particularly on sidewalk snow and ice clearing, and also the soon-to-be implemented leaf blower regulation program that will be starting up probably within the next several weeks. So this person will be assisting in the enforcement of all of those programs. It is a new position in the FY18 budget, but it was not an additional full-time equivalent in the budget. What we did was upgrade we took an existing laborer's position in the Highway Division and actually upgraded that position and created this new position. So the FTEs in the department remain the same. Mm-hmm. So I ask your approval so that we can vigorously move to fill this position quickly.
Yeah. As we always do, we urge you to make sure that you cast your net widely to get a diverse pool of people. And I mention that because in the sanitation and highway department, the diversity levels are fairly low. And it seems to me that that is an area where we can improve, as I'm sure you will. But, you know, this is a situation where I think you really need to be aggressive in terms of casting that diversity net wide. So.
Okay, any other comments?
What desired skills are you looking for in a candidate? Because that's quite the range.
We're looking for somebody that has a sanitation and health background. We're looking for somebody that can hit the ground running, So I'd like someone with at least a basic amount of experience, preferably somebody who's worked in these programs, maybe in other communities, or even for private industry. And somebody who is, at least has the ability to become an enforcement officer. So yeah, it is a wide range of abilities that we're looking for. It's going to be particularly difficult to fill this job, I think, and looking for the ultimate candidate. And it's most important that we get somebody who can click with the rest of within the environment of the town here. So it's going to be difficult.
Well, we
Okay.
wish you luck.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? I will therefore move that we authorize the filling of the Assistant Recycling Coordinator vacancy in the Public Works Department. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Next item is Rec Department, question of authorizing the filling of the administrative lead teacher site coordinator vacancy in the Rec Department.
Hello, good evening. Lee Jackson with Brookline Recreation.
So this is your maiden voyage here, eh?
This is my maiden voyage
Well,
here.
welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about the position and what's
So
going on.
we're here to request an authorization to hire for a new position, the administrative lead teacher and site coordinator for our after-school program at Brookline Recreation. This position will coordinate, direct, and schedule staff for the after-school program. And we're looking for someone at director level experience preferred. So we're very excited about this position, and we hope to grow the number of seats as well. The after-school program, and this person will help that, and they'll help provide that consistency that we need. So,
Okay.
And this is administration, recreation administration?
yes, sir.
Okay. Just to make the point, recreation administration has a fairly low diversity range here as compared to recreation programs, which has fairly extensive diversity. So I would urge you to be, somewhat aggressive in making sure that you cast your net widely so that the number of people who you look at to consider for this position have significant amounts of diversity.
Thank you.
Recreation is an area where it's not just a question of, that's the right thing to do and all that, but rather, it makes the program more effective that you have people in the administration who can bring different perspectives, different experiences, and different ideas to the administration of the program.
Thank you so much, and I assure you we will. We are working closely with HR to recruit and advertise. We're sent forward names for contacts for MRPA, NRPA, and other applicable education as well in order to recruit. So thank you for the mention, and we'll do our best.
Okay. I'll move that we authorize the filling of the administrative lead teacher site coordinator vacancy in the Recreation Department. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we have some fire department staffing questions. The first one is authorizing the filling of 5 vacancies in the fire department. Chief Ward, welcome.
Yes, good evening. How is everybody tonight?
Okay.
We're down to, out of the 153 positions, we're down to 138. You already approved 10 for the September class, and I'm asking for an additional 5 for a class that will run later in the year.
Wow, that's a lot of new folks. Okay. This is pretty straightforward. It's civil service, you get the list.
Which off of the list, and
Yeah.
there's nothing we can do about this list, but as I think you know, we're running some programs. There's a new exam in April. And we're
okay.
stepping things up to get to the high school, Brookline Day, and a few other events through town.
Good, okay, thank you. This list is off an exam, 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yes.
Fortunately, it runs till December of 2018. So I'm hoping this is the last time we'll go into this list. I'm hoping the retirements will slow down, but I don't know.
Okay, so I'll move that we authorize the filling of 5 vacancies in the fire department. That's 5 plus 10, wow.
Can I ask a question?
By all means.
Not that I know that much about the civil service list, but if it's that old from when they took the exam, how often do you get people who have moved on and done other things? Like, how far down the list do you usually get?
This list, unfortunately, we've run out of residents, so they'll give us a list of people that had put Brookline down as one of their choices. You can put up to 10 cities and towns. We have the residence restriction here, but once we run out, we'll get other people that put Brookline down. I only remember this happening one other time, and we only had to take one person that wasn't a resident. This time, it could be 5. The only good news is I did get a call from a Brookline firefighter that left 4.5 years ago. He's coming up on his 5 years, and he's deciding now whether he wants to come back or not. So that would save us of me coming back and asking for another 6th position.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move that we authorize the filling of 5 vacancies in the fire department. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green.
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay, and now the next item is 2 promotions. Ryan Guilfoyle to captain, Lieutenant Ryan Guilfoyle to captain, and firefighter Francis Differ to lieutenant. Chief Ward.
Yes, I don't know if you remember, but the 10 promotions last time, I thought it did well, that I'll read the names off, then you voted, and then we do the badge.
Right.
If that's all right with everyone.
Sure.
Okay, Lieutenant Ryan Guilfoyle will be promoted to captain. Ryan's a graduate of Brookline High. He joined the department in 2008 and was promoted to lieutenant in 2015. He has worked and been a value asset of all of our divisions, including training, fire prevention, and suppression. His commitment to his professional development includes certifications as firefighter 1-2, fire officer, fire instructor, and EMT. Ryan Guilfoyle. Firefighter Francis Diver is being promoted to lieutenant. He joined the department in 2010 and has been a temporary lieutenant since April. He has his firefighter 1-2 certification and is also certified as an EMT. He's currently working in the training division where he's preparing for our next class, Recruit Academy number 48. Those are the 2 gentlemen.
And that's the 10 that were
The 10,
big
right.
class.
Yes.
Well, congratulations. So first, let me thank you and congratulate you on behalf of the board, and congratulate and thank your families, because we know that being a firefighter is not only hard on you, but it's also hard on your families, and the fact that you're getting promoted is a indication of our confidence in you and confidence in the department. And we know that when we need you, you guys are there. And it's a great comfort to us that you're there, and just congratulations.
Yeah, I'll just say congratulations as well, echo the chair's remarks. I am particularly impressed that both of you have pursued professional designation certifications, firefighter 1-2 and EMT. I find that to be a great trend that I think our former chief started, and I compliment our current chief, Chief Ward, for continuing the emphasis put on continuing to learn and grow professionally and hone skills that you may not learn when you first come on the job as a recruit. So thank you for your past work, and best of luck in your future endeavors and leadership in the department.
Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you for bringing a child. Love it when children come to the board meetings. Thank you.
I don't have anything to add other than to echo what Selectman Franco mentioned, and that is the importance of learning and growing. In most of our professions, what we learned in school or the academy quickly becomes out of date. I assume that that's the case in the firefighting business. So the fact that you're continuing to learn and learning new skills that are very important to the town is important. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much for your service.
Okay. Oh, we have to formally vote. Okay. So I will move that we authorize the following promotions within the fire department. Lieutenant Ryan Guilfoy to captain and firefighter Francis Differ to lieutenant. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green?
Aye.
Selectman Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I guess that's us. Congratulations. Okay, we have two licensing matters, and then we have some interviews for boards and commissions. So the first is, and we're running about 10 minutes late, so I guess that's not too bad as these things go. First is question of approving the application of P&L Restaurant doing business as Rainbow Sushi. Li Liang, owner and manager for common victual license, an entertainment license at 187 Harvard Street. This is competing. Seating capacity of 32, hours of operation, Sunday 12:15 p.m. to 10 p.m., Monday to Thursday 11:30 to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday 11:30 to 11 p.m., and liquor hours will be the same. Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and members of the Selectmen Committee. For the record, my name is Attorney Russell Chin. I'm here representing the applicant, P&L Restaurant, Inc., DBA Rainbow Sushi. The applicant's president and principal is next to me. Her name is Lily Liang, and co-manager is behind her.
Okay.
We're here before you looking for a CV license, an entertainment license, and approval to transfer the liquor license. Malton Wine.
So this is, there's an existing establishment there.
There is, Mr. Chairman, there's an existing restaurant called Homu Sushi Restaurant, and the principals of that restaurant are also here with us.
Thank you. Are there going to be changes in operation between this and the old restaurant?
Not anything substantial or significant. It's going to be pretty much as, there may be some menu changes, but relatively minor.
Okay, and the hours of operation are?
Will be almost identical.
Okay. And this is also a public hearing on the liquor license. So I know, I'm glad to see that you have an alternate manager also. Sometimes we find new operators come in, they don't have an alternate manager, and you have to have a manager or an alternate manager on site at all times. So that's good. Wanna? Oh, yeah. You can do the honors.
Bad cop.
He can be the bad cop.
So I want to hear a little bit about your meeting with Lieutenant Hayes and what you may have learned about liquor service and some of the Brookline-specific rules and regulations that we have here.
I'd like to defer to Ms. Lamb to answer your questions.
Yes, thank you so much.
We're having a little communication
Okay.
issue. I don't speak her dialect, she doesn't speak mine, so we're using a third language.
I agree.
Could we ask the current owner to come and translate the question for her?
Okay.
Well, I guess she met the lieutenant, and the lieutenant taught her like what underage license, what to be careful of, what's what on the license, what's fake license, what's not, and also what are the hours can be serving alcohol. If you train your employees and things like that.
So can we hear a little bit about the logbook and what has to be in that folder, that document?
You want to hear?
I want to hear what she learned from Lieutenant Hayes in that meeting.
Well, she's going to go home and review a little more too, if that's okay. She's a little nervous right now. Sorry about that.
That's fine. I would encourage her to study very closely. We take the service of alcohol very, very seriously in town, and we send underage college students into restaurants and try and trick owners and bartenders into serving them. And we hope that we don't have to see you back here again and have to contemplate disciplinary action. So make sure you study and review all the materials that Lieutenant Hayes provided you.
Okay, thank you. I will let her know and make sure that she go home and study well. Thank you.
We'll reiterate the comments that we're hearing this evening. Tomorrow, when I go back to my office, I'll have one of my paralegal translators contact Ms. Lam and go through very specifically your questions, your concerns, and make sure that she understood them, and make sure that she goes through the brochure and understands it.
Okay.
You might mention that one successful strategy we don't seem to see back here, the restaurants who card everyone, even me, they would ask, for an identification. So that's a good way to make sure that you never have a violation.
I think that's a very good idea. It's an across-the-board rule. It's something that is easy to remember because you're applying it 100% of the time.
Exactly.
And it makes perfect sense. I will mention that to her as well.
Could we also ask that you confirm to, I guess, the town administrator that you, or that your translator has gone through those issues with, with the people at the restaurant?
Yeah.
We're not going to go and monitor that, but I just want, your acknowledgement or confirmation that that was done.
I will send you a certification, if that's acceptable, signed and notarized by my paralegal translator who speaks her dialect.
Right. Okay.
If that's acceptable.
I have a question about the CV license, the underlying license, if you will. I see that there are no parking spaces included with the lease, and I'm wondering if this establishment plans to do delivery service, and if they do, what the plan is to park that delivery vehicle.
Certainly. It's a good question. Parking is always a consideration in every town, and we're cognizant of that as well. There is, my understanding, a parking lot behind the restaurant called Alton Place, which has parking available there. And in front of the restaurant, there was also metered parking on Harvard. So between those two locations, we vision that there should not be a problem with deliveries.
So delivery service is part of the business plan, and the sense is that on-street parking or some other arrangement will be made for the delivery vehicle.
That's right. And the current owner has been very communicative with us and diligent about letting us know how things have been going, what's gone well for her, what issues she's encountered, so that we have someone with hands-on experience right there.
This is a public hearing. If there's any members of the public who wish to speak on this license, now is your time. I see none. Any other questions from the board? So I will move that we approve the application of P&L Restaurant, Inc., doing business as Rainbow Sushi, Lily Liang, owner and manager for Common Victular and Entertainment, radio and TV license at 187 Harvard Street, seating capacity of 32, hours of operation Sunday 12:15 p.m. to 10 p.m., Monday to Thursday 11:30 a.m. to 10 p.m., Friday and Saturday 11:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. Liquor hours will be the same. And I'll also move that we approve the application of Wang Ying, Inc., doing business as Home Sushi and Asian Cuisine, Ying Chen, president and manager holder of a license to expose, keep for sale, and to sell wine and malt beverages, to be drunk on the premises of a 7-day common victual license at 187 Harvard Street for a transfer of said license to P&L Restaurant, Inc., doing business as Rainbow Sushi. Lily Yang, owner and manager, said license be exercised at the same location, will be pledged to Ying Chen. Liquor hours will be Sunday, same hours from the previous section, and it'll be conditioned on the acknowledgement of the translation.
Of the translation of the training requirements.
Of the training requirement. And there's an alternate manager, Kai Peng Zhen. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? And maybe I should have read this a little deeper, but I couldn't find whether this is a new restaurant or taking over that restaurant on the corner of Alton Place and Harvard.
Certainly, they'll be taking over an existing restaurant.
Okay.
It's one storefront in from the
Yeah,
corner.
no, I know. It used to be a Greek restaurant.
Years ago.
Yeah. Just curious.
Okay, we have the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco?
Aye.
Selectman Heller?
Aye.
Selectman Green? Aye. Selectman Hamilton?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On a meaningful note, I just want to say greetings to Attorney Green, whom I haven't seen for 36 years.
I
I was about to say something myself. We graduated from Boston College Law School. and we're also on the Boston College Third World Law Journal together as founding members. Good. It's good seeing you, Russell.
Making connections here.
Yes.
Triple Eagle. Thank you. We have a public hearing on a change of beneficial interest, and this is the application of S&R Hospitality, doing business as Prairie Fire. Daniel Kerrigan, manager, holder of all kinds of alcoholic beverage, common victualler, and entertainment license at 242 Harbor Street for a change in beneficial interests, transfer of the stock, and this is regarding the alcoholic beverage license exercised at 242 Harbor. Haven't we seen you guys before?
You have. Happy to be back.
So what's going on here?
We started the business with 3 equity partners, and 2 of the 3 are currently remaining. So one equity partner is no longer part of the operation, but there's been no change in the financial setup of the restaurant. I am the manager on record. And
just for the record, just tell us your name.
Apologize, Daniel Kerrigan.
Okay, sorry. Just want to make sure our recording secretary knows.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from board members?
I noticed that you guys are doing a lot of construction. I'm wondering how that's proceeding and when we can expect a grand opening.
Thank you for asking. We are very close. Mr. Selectman Green has visited the restaurant.
I have.
We met in person in the dining room. It's come a long way since you saw it a few weeks ago. But construction is essentially complete. We're seeking approvals from the building department this week. So I'm sure we'll have a little running around to do this week and next, and we'll begin training and get the doors open shortly. So we're very close.
By
We're
Labor
excited.
Day, it sounds like.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
And I guess for the record, this is not another pizza parlor on.
Thank you for asking. I'm hearing a lot of that as well.
It's beyond pizzas, right?
It certainly is. So it's a wood-fired oven is sort of the premise of the cooking there, but and of course in the wood-fired oven we will cook pizza, which is a beautiful, very high heat style of house-made sourdough pizza, but oven-roasted vegetables, some oven-roasted shellfish, some slow-roasted meats. We'll have handmade pastas on the menu, even a few sandwiches. So a complete menu for sure. Not a pizza place.
Okay. And this is a public hearing. If there's any member of the public who wishes to speak on this application on the change of beneficial interest, now is your time. And I see none. Any other questions from the board? So I'll see none. So I'll move that we approve the application of S&R Hospitality, LLC, doing business as Prairie Fire, Daniel Kerrigan, manager, holder of all kinds alcoholic beverage, common victualler, and entertainment license at 242 Harvard Street for change in beneficial interest, transfer of stock under MDL section, chapter 138, section 12, all alcoholic beverage license exercised at 242 Harvard Street. All those in favor, please say aye. Selectman Franco.
Aye.
Selectman Heller.
Aye.
Selectman Green. Aye. Selectman Hamilton.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Good luck.
Thank you very much. Have a nice
Okay.
night.
Okay. Moving ahead, we have some interviews for boards and commissions. So, Mr. Peterson, you're up first. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Seems like yesterday you were up here.
That's right. And the day before. Yes.
So tell us about your activities on the Board of Assessors and what's happening.
Well, it's been a great time. I think it's, over the years, I really think this is the best Board of Assessors in the state. And it's been a great pleasure to be there. We've had some significant victories in the last year in terms of resolving disputes, particularly with respect to some of the utilities. The number of appeals before the appellate tax board is way down. So, and of course, not everyone is going to be happy with their assessments. But we hope that people realize that we listen and we make every effort to be fair. So we do our best.
You know, it's interesting because you would think that complaints about assessments would rise to this board, but in my 4 years on the board, 5 years, however long it's been, I've heard nothing, and I think that's a testament to the job that you guys are doing. So,
I personally might get a call once every 2 or 3 years, and all I tell anyone is that I'll make sure that it's looked at carefully.
I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Peterson pretty closely over the past few months as I chair a committee that was set up by town meeting, I guess almost a year ago, I guess, looking at senior tax issues. And I found Dr. Peterson to be incredibly thoughtful, and I too am impressed by our Board of Assessors. It's a group that really is dedicated to helping taxpayers out and being fair and deliberate in the way that assessments are done, and very open and transparent. So I think Dr. Peterson deserves to remain on the board, and I look forward to continuing to work with him over the next few months as we wrap up this committee and ultimately go to town meeting for approval of a couple of warrant articles.
Okay. Questions? That was easy.
I have one question.
Sure.
Why did you decide to apply in the first place?
It's an interesting story. It came shortly after the Bueller decision, when the town was forced to revalue properties, dramatically reducing the value of rent-controlled properties, and thereby increasing the values and the taxes on many others. There's a lot of upsetment in the town. There was a political change. The Conservatives actually took over the Board of Selectmen in Brookline. There was an great upsetment with the most recent assessment by a firm called Cole, Layer, Trumbull. And the new selectmen decided they'd like to try a conservative on the board. They believed I was a conservative. It shouldn't have any bearing on assessment, of course. I came on, I looked as carefully as I could at that CLT assessment, and I thought it was very well done. But it was a time of immense turmoil, and things were really interesting for some years. But as I said before, it's been a great pleasure to be there, and I really believe we have a wonderful staff, and I think the best department in the state.
You know, it's interesting bringing up that past history. I think the selectmen's meeting, it must have been, we're talking about setting the tax rate, or it was the meeting after the assessments went out. There was such an uproar that the selectmen's meeting was held in the high school.
You're talking about 88.
Right. And that was the first selectmen's meeting I ever attended. So that was in 19. So I guess we're
dating ourselves.
We're dating ourselves. So
The more
all of
things
us.
change, the more they stay the same.
And I remember that very discreetly. Well, it was interesting seeing how the system was working, and it was quite an unruly crowd. And we've had a few here like that.
Do you have any thoughts as to how we can do a better job of recruiting people to boards and commissions?
I've thought about it because it's and particularly with respect to diversity, too. And I think when terms come up, and I'm sure this will be my last term if I'm approved, and I think we really do need to look very, very carefully. And the best we can do, I think, is ask around, make sure people know that the position is available. But it's I suppose it's a matter of talking to each other, talking to people, and finding out who's really interested. Because, you know, I've been in Brookline 50 years now. Of course, I realize that it's not like being a townie. You know, I'm still a newcomer here, but I've always been involved, and I wanted to be involved, and so I wanted to be involved in something where I thought I had some expertise that could be brought to bear. I thought it was useful for an economist to be on the board, someone who knows statistics and knows regression. I thought this, so I welcomed the opportunity at the time, but I think it's just a matter of continuing to talk, to tell people how much fun it is and how enjoyable it is to serve on boards, and the wonderful people who help run this town. But just keep trying to get the word out.
Thank you.
If I may add, it also is a function of reaching out to your friends who we hope would be diverse, but also your professional and other social contacts. Because, I mean, that's where people are pulled into boards from. I mean, it's not. I mean, people join a board because someone they know says, "Why don't you consider this?" So, I mean, I would just urge, I'm not speaking just to you, but to everyone to, you know, assess your circles, and you know, look for people to participate in civic affairs from those friends and professional relations. I'd also like to mention, looking through your publications, there's a lot of very interesting stuff, including a paper on economic growth and affordable housing in New England. Very, very important topic today. That was written in 1988. I would hope you or someone else would update that to help us understand the relationship or maybe the limitations on affordable housing that great economic growth either fosters or hinders.
It does indeed, and that was done at the time of a huge boom, you know, in the New England economy and in housing. And with the boom, and with people even coming in looking for jobs in New England, it was a miracle of Massachusetts, as Dukakis put it when he was running for president. But the problem was that, you know, people coming in looking for jobs and being unable to find housing, and how do we make housing available? And housing takes time. I mean, if we took measures to try to stimulate new construction, I mean, it would be 2 or 3 years and perhaps the boom would be over. So my major recommendation at the time was that we ease restrictions on people taking tenants into their homes, possibly, as one possible short-term solution. More broadly, affordable housing is a huge, huge, huge problem. And I think, you know, historically, we got affordable housing as hand-me-downs. And the housing might not be very good. And it might even be dangerous sometimes, but it was cheap. You can't do that anymore. We don't allow housing that doesn't meet pretty strict codes. So it really is difficult. And all I'd say, you know, so beyond saying we have to keep working on it, I don't have any magic answers. I mean, the housing construction is very expensive. We've gone quite a ways in terms of trying to provide affordable housing, in terms of subsidized housing. We require that new units, you know, have affordable units, but beyond that, I would just applaud any further work in the area.
No, I mean, there are no easy answers, but sure. It's important to hear ideas and questions raised from academic sources. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for agreeing to serve again. And I think we'll be doing the reappointment tonight. Okay, thank you. I don't see Derek Choi. Oh, it's been postponed? Okay. So, Mr. Allen, come join the party.
Thank you. Good evening.
Welcome. So tell us about what's going on with the NCD.
Yeah, well, it's it's a terrific commission. I got interested in it in part because it's a nice compromise between allowing property owners to have some ability to renovate or expand their properties, including in some cases developers, but in balance with neighborhood goals for keeping the character of their neighborhoods. And that's something that I think we all can relate to, and it's really working quite well. It's a great tool. So I'm currently an alternate on that board. I've been there roughly 2.5 years. There's an opening for full membership, and I hope you'll consider me for that position.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Allen? I noticed there's a lot of expired terms on this board, so we're going to have to step up.
I assume the expired members are no longer serving, or?
No, they serve until replacement, so we're okay. There's a question with Mr. Bell, who has been the chair, who's the Preservation Commission appointee. He's now come off the Preservation Commission, but still wishes to stay on the NCD. So we have we've been talking with town council on whether we need to do anything. We need to slide him into one of the other positions. So that's an open question. But Mr. Bell wishes to continue too.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Was there anything that surprised you while serving?
Well, I don't know if I would characterize it quite as a surprise. One of the things that we talk about on the board is we really have just one neighborhood, the Toxteth NCD, that's kind of come together as a neighborhood to take advantage of this. And we're hopeful that there will be other neighborhoods that emerge who are also interested in this tool.
Yes, there are two NCDs in town for those who are not familiar with the tool. So Toxteth, that's the area around near the Lawrence School in Precinct 3, Brookline Village. And then the other one is Hancock Village, which is a little different. And the Hancock Village right now is, that one is under discussion in settlement of the lawsuit. And up in the air is what's to happen to that NCD. As part of the settlement, the terms of the settlement are that the buildings and development pursuant to the settlement will not come under the jurisdiction of the NCD. But then there's a question, okay, once that's done, what happens? And one of the memorandum of understanding says that the NCD can be modified going forward, but it would have to be at the mutual agreement of the town and Chestnut Hill Realty. And if you think about the way we do NCDs or local historic districts, we usually try to get the consent of the affected folks at a pretty high level. So I believe at Toxteth we had maybe 85-90% of the affected homeowners, and that's kind of become the standard, the way we approach local historic districts. So we were struggling with, okay, what could an NCD look like that kind of, set a bar where there was a trigger, like the Toxteth, I believe, has a trigger above which the NCD is invoked.
That's
and
right.
Below which the NCD isn't. So minor kinds of things, there's no NCD review. But if you're going to be doing an addition beyond X number of square feet or X percent, then the NCD would be invoked. We would try to come up with a kind of a similar framework, but my thinking was if we get the zoning right and the zoning prohibits any additional buildings, why do we need the NCD? And that's a topic that was being discussed today at a meeting with some of the neighbors in Chestnut Hill.
In terms of Hancock Village.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, Hancock Village. So that one is still being discussed, and we'll see where it lands. And that's going to be one of the topics at this town meeting. So more to
undoubtedly.
Yeah.
I have two questions for you. One
Sure.
more philosophical and one more practical. And I will start with the philosophical question. One of the struggles that I imagine you have and your colleagues on the NDD is you're forced to adjudicate, to some extent, neighborhood disputes. You've got somebody who's proposing a project, wants to do something, whether it's put dormers on a house or put an addition on or change the landscaping. And in some cases, you have opponents to that change. I'm wondering how you navigate these sort of struggle, the sort of disputes, and come up with a fair decision, but also one that respects the intent of the NCD.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, philosophically, a lot of the board comes from a similar perspective on this, that they're homeowners, residents as well, and so they can empathize, sympathize with how the neighborhood feels, and we have, in fairly great detail, how we're to protect the things that they consider are important, and to not, look with too hard an eye at those things that they have decided are not essential to protect. We've all, in a practical manner, we've actually been quite fortunate in the cases that have come before us. They've been really high quality applications, so they've been very well considered, and my view is that they've been very well executed. So that's not to say that there's no friction or give and take, but we've been really pleased with the results, and I don't think that the board or anyone involved has really had to take too heavy a hand on any of the parties.
So my sort of practical operational question is, I am of the opinion that this commission is going to become more active over the next several years. We've heard that we've got 2 districts in place right now. I anticipate that there are going to be additional ones in the future for a variety of different reasons. Right now, the NCD looks really at aesthetic issues. So, what does the property look like from the outside? And it doesn't deal with sort of the other side of zoning, which is use restrictions. I'm wondering if you think that the NCD, as it's currently constituted, both in terms of skill sets and personnel, and some of the discussions that you have, is ready to have that sort of other side of the zoning conversation, or based on the way that sort of you operate today and the skill sets, again, that you have on the commission, that would be an uncomfortable, maybe even an impossible conversation?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. It's not actually one that we've, to my knowledge, given any thought. I would say that, for instance, in the case of Toxteth, that the issues are, many of them are aesthetic, but they're, I think, at the core, about the character of a place and the experience of it. One of the protections is on porches that face the sidewalk, and that's that's actually more about the activity of the street and how you engage with your neighbors. So how far afield of that is the issue of land use is, I'm not sure. We'd have to think about that.
Any other questions?
Do you find that you have to educate people who don't realize what the NCD is?
Yes, that definitely comes up, though we are fortunate that with Toxteth, it's a pretty tight-knit community. And as the chair mentioned, we had a really high percentage of input and buy-in. So almost everyone in the neighborhood is pretty familiar with it, and almost everyone is behind it. So we're fortunate in that regard.
Yeah. Hopefully, the next one will have a similar buy-in. Hopefully. Any other questions? I think we'll be doing this tonight, so you should be hearing.
Terrific. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Next up is Dr. Moyer. Patiently sitting here since the beginning, my gosh.
Good evening.
Welcome, welcome. So what, this is for an appointment to the Advisory Council on Public Health. So
That's me.
Tell us about your interest in the council and.
Right. Trying to think. Let me give you a quick sketch of who I am and why I'm interested in this position. My name is Peter Moyer. I live here in Brookline. I'm at 267 Walnut Street, which is just a block down from Lincoln School. We've lived here, I listened to this fellow before me, he lived here 50 years, that's a long time. We've lived here 34 years. I'm an emergency physician, that's how I come to this role. I was at first, for those of you who are older, you may remember it, Boston City Hospital, I was the head of the emergency department there, and then when that became Boston Medical Center, I was the head of that emergency department as well until 2000, and then really my most public health orientation was in Boston EMS. I was the medical director for Boston EMS Fire and Police from 2000 to 2010, and we answered, for those of you who know Boston EMS answered through the Public Health Commission. So I have some sense of public health. While I was the medical director, I got my MPH, which was, my brother said the best thing that ever happened to me was enjoyable. I was the oldest student in the class. I'm not going to go off on this for a long time. Most of the students thought I was faculty. None of them shared any of their notes with me. It took me a while. I remember, this is really, I didn't mean to tell the story, but there I am after my first stats test, nervous, thinking, here I am in the chair of the department. God knows, nobody even cares. Even my mother didn't know I was taking this test. Nobody cares. And I'm listening to the students in the elevator describe how most of the questions were on last year's test. I'm thinking, I can't cheat. Oh, here I am, the chair. What? So then I realized it was legit. They had all the old questions in the library. Of course, none of the students told me that. Anyway, so I've got an MPH, and I worked in public health arenas. And the area that I worked in most, I was there in 2001, so I worked a lot in disaster preparedness, which was good for me. It taught me a lot of stuff. For those of you who know me, I lost a son at 9/11, so that it was a group that could really identify with me and my problems during it, so that was good for me. And I also really realized the significance of and the difficulty of the various public service agencies, public safety agencies working together. I had never really thought about it too much, but I thought about it a lot afterwards, and I guess it's pretty natural. Everybody withdraws into their own turf. I learned a lot about turf battles, EMS, fire, and police, and I was actually put in the position because I was older and I had been around, and my job was pointedly to be in charge of the three services and get them to collaborate. So I've worked on that stuff. Since retirement, which is 5 or 6 years ago, I have been before this Board of Selectmen several times around my interest in Nicaragua. I've gone to Nicaragua, I'm part of a sister city, for those of you who don't know it. I don't know if everybody on the board knows it, but there is a sister city between Brookline and a town, and Quezalcoatl. Hard name to pronounce, well done.
Still haven't gotten it right.
And
Quezalcoatl.
in northwest Nicaragua, and I've gone there for several years in a row, and I've done it in concert, as part of the sister city, but also we do it in concert with all of you. And actually, you don't know this, but our town has lent a lot of expertise, particularly around water. We're looking at water right now, which has been very helpful. So there is a real cross collaboration between our efforts and Nicaraguans in an international way. So at any rate, I'm eager to do it. I've interviewed with Dr. Jett. I'm eager to work with him. I'm glad to have him here. And I know that new public health stuff comes up constantly. I have a grip on it. I think my particular strength, as I said, in public safety, but other stuff as well. We used to have, I should tell you this, I think we should reinstitute it. I've said this to different people, but nobody's done it. But I think we should do it, which is, we used to have an EMS committee, which was friendly. It wasn't harsh, but it was fire and police and various town officials looking at, in this case, Fallon. And I think we should do it again. I always think it's always good to have somebody looking over your shoulder, setting up standards, making sure you meet with them. I'm not complaining about Fallon, but I am saying I think it's a good idea. We should reinstitute it. So, and I think that the last fire chief was not too crazy about doing it, because I talked to him several times about it. But there's probably an opportunity now. Anyway, that's why I want to do it.
Sounds like a good idea. Any questions?
Well, I learned about your interest in Quezalcoatl when we served together on the committee to hire a new health director, and we got Dr. Jett. It seems to me that your vast experience in many areas of public health are very appropriate for the advisory council. Have you had the opportunity to attend many of its meetings and understand its functions?
Not really. I'm friendly with the head of it, with Tony Schlaff, so he'll fill me in, but no, I really don't know exactly how it works.
We'll appoint you.
I'm sure you're a good study.
Shouldn't have said that.
I have a question.
Go for it.
What are your thoughts on mental health with regard to public health?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll be quick on it. It's, what do I think of it? I think this is not really directed at Brookline, but it's directed at our society. I think for as wealthy a society as we are, I think we do a poor job in mental health. I've watched this from an emergency department and trying to get people into mental health facilities, how difficult it was, the lack of insurance, the lack of coordination, et cetera. So I don't think we do well as a society, and I think it could take plenty of work. I can't, you know as well as I do the whole history of deinstitutionalization and then failure to really provide other resources. So I think it's a big problem. I think it's a big problem around the world. I've worked in Africa and people with schizophrenia would literally be, this is in Ghana, and it's a fairly wealthy country, clothesless, hair completely a mess on the side of the street, and I thought, wow, this really is quite a reflection of society. We do better than that, but we could do much better. That's what I think.
Do you think it's a public health issue?
Yes.
Okay.
That was your question. I could have made it easier. Yes.
No, but I like the exposition.
One, having spent time in Quezalcoatl, where we're giving a lot to that town, but also they're giving a lot to us. I was wondering if you could sort of briefly mention some of the things that you've learned from that experience or your experience in Ghana that would be useful here in Brookline. How have they informed your understanding of how we can deal with any variety of problems that we have here in Brookline?
Well, Yeah, I think it's a good point, your opening statement about it really is a bi-directional relationship, which is good, and I learn a lot from them. Part of it is human nature stuff that I learn. We stay with families, I learn about them, and maybe it's a result of just evolution of human behavior, but as much poorer people, they seem to be very community-oriented and very innocent and very cordial in their interpersonal relations. So I find it very refreshing. You know, we're all much more hardened and suspicious, et cetera. There really are a lot of very nice individuals. So that's nice. That's good. What else have I learned from them? Well, they're better than we are in some things. They're better in, what are they better in? Vaccinations. They have each little community, and there are 25 communities in this town of 10,000. Each community has a health, it's a health volunteer actually, who is typically a woman, matter of fact, all of them are women that I met, whose job is to follow families. So they're literally in charge of 200 people, their little neighborhood, and it may be for vaccinations, it may be for prenatal care, but they go around. So if you, for instance, hadn't vaccinated your kids, she would knock on your door and tell you she has a record, and she'd tell you hadn't, and you would get your kids vaccinated. So I think that's, you know, they take a collective responsibility for the community. Similarly on water, that town has really taught me how important water is, and they have very good community input into their water management. They have something called, doesn't make any difference what it's called, but they have little community organizations which look at the water, so they're in charge of, the wells have been dug, but they're in charge of fixing the pump, charging water. It costs water. I didn't even think of this. Cost money for water. So I think the community involvement in various aspects are something that we could learn. Not always easily transferable, but I think that's true. What else do I think? They pay a lot of attention to their kids, which is wonderful. Their primary education is really superior. I don't think that's, I think we do as well, so I don't think that's such a difference. It's something we can learn. I'm trying to think what other things we've done. They're very good in disaster management. They're very good, no surprise. They have earthquakes, they have volcanoes, they got hurricanes, they have floods. They have a plan. I happened to be there one day when a volcano erupted. It wasn't a major eruption. There was maybe a couple of millimeters of ash over everything. But they all met at 7 in the morning. Nobody had to call them and tell them. They all met at the health center and took off and had a whole campaign as to what they were going to do in the various neighborhoods that were affected. So that stuff's effective. Water is, I guess, probably the area we're going to share the most. This is my last comment. There's a woman named Betsy Riley who's in charge of quality for the MWRA. She's the one in charge of our water quality. She's gone with us a couple of times, and she's very good. She was in the Peace Corps herself in Kenya, so she has a good orientation. She was happy to stay with families, and she was very, very useful in terms of water. So it was interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
What was her name?
What's her name?
Yeah.
Betsy Riley, Reilley.
Okay.
I work with MWRA, so, I mean, I work, my agency works with MWRA.
Yeah,
so.
She's been excellent.
Any other questions? Okay, Dr. Moyer, thank you for stepping up and hanging out with us.
Good to see you all. Thank you.
And I believe we will be appointing that board tonight. Okay. And you must be Elizabeth Armstrong.
I am. Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us about yourself, and you're applying to be on the Preservation Commission.
Well, you're probably wondering why a former nurse and attorney is interested in being on the Preservation
I was going to ask.
And you've talked with some of the other applicants and discussed recruitment. So I stand before you as a demonstration model of being recruited to a board by a commission member. So my good friend Elton Alperin is here, and he served on the commission for 20 years. And through our friendship and dinner parties and discussions, we've just ended up frequently talking about the Preservation Commission. So my husband and I moved to the Boston area in '99 and lived in Newton for a number of years and moved to Brookline about 5 years ago. And I think sometime around then, Elton started sort of working on me. So, you know, many discussions about the ins and outs and what the issues were last night, and then eventually somehow I found myself on ride-alongs, looking at proposed projects and sites and discussing what the issues were and what the guidelines were. And then more recently, Elton was complaining to me that the attorney on the Preservation Commission was rotating off and asked me if I would consider being on it. So this really has been an intriguing idea for me, because although my, certainly my legal career didn't exactly line up with the Preservation Commission, I do have a background in litigation and in public interest work, and then my most recent job was in state government. I've served on a number of boards and commissions in that capacity, and I'm very familiar with the type of work that a commission does in listening to and reviewing the submissions before it, listening to all stakeholders, trying to arrive at consensus. And as a matter of fact, before coming here tonight, I attended the Preservation Commission. And I do feel like this is something that, this work seems familiar to me, even though my background isn't in preservation. I have a strong interest in design. My husband and I are in the process of rebuilding a historic home in Western Massachusetts. So that's how a nurse and attorney ended up being interested in the Preservation Commission, and I thank you for considering my application.
Do you live in one of the historic districts?
I don't. I live on Summit Ave, right off Beacon in the Coolidge Corner area.
Okay.
Oh, I do have a question.
Sure.
So will you work to recruit other people?
Yeah, I guess I have to follow precedent and do that.
I believe it's called Pay It Forward.
So I guess, what do you see as your approach, your philosophy in analyzing cases, and how do you make up the deficit of experience in this area?
Well, once you've been to law school and practiced law for 25 years, inevitably I'm going to use a legal framework to analyze. Have reviewed Mass Laws, Chapter 40C. I've reviewed the guidelines. I would be looking to help the commission, understand its responsibility to operate within those guidelines. I think that there's a lot about legal decision-making and the critical analysis that you develop as an attorney that would be helpful in approaching the applications that come before the commission, because there are always competing interests that are important. And so the interests of the town and the neighborhood, those are very important issues. But the homeowner's interest is important too. And so the best way forward from my philosophy or viewpoint is to fully sound issues. Oftentimes in any kind of deliberations, you have to ask for more information. You have to have gone out and looked at the site and know what you're talking about and reviewed all the submissions carefully. And perhaps the best way is to form a subcommittee or ask for more information. But ultimately, I think one wants to try to reach some kind of consensus where you're respecting the legal framework that the Preservation Commission is the foundation of it, but then to also really balance the interests of design, community interests, and try to help the property owner achieve as much as you can of what they're looking for.
Any other questions?
I would say you have a very different and interesting resume. I can understand your interest in preservation. I have no professional background in it myself, but I am very interested in it and want to make sure my house is, which is Victorian, is involved in getting the Grafton McKay Historic District passed. What is your view about the workload of the commission? Have you had an opportunity to think about that and maybe talk with Elton and?
Yeah, sure. I've discussed it with Elton. I'm retired about a year ago. I, live in Coolidge Corner. I mean, it would be very easy and convenient for me to attend meetings, to do site visits, to do the groundwork that would help me to understand the issues that were coming before the commission.
I think,
I have no other questions.
okay. So I think this board we're not appointing tonight, so you'll hear shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and I think last up tonight is Nancy Kaysen? Kaysen. Welcome.
Thank you.
And you're applying for Park and Rec.
Yes.
So tell us about your interest in Park and Rec.
So I am interested in Park and Rec for a number of reasons. One is that I am the mom of delicious, very active 11-year-old boys, and we are an incredibly active family that have really benefited from the Park and Rec programming and facilities for the entire time that we have resided in Brookline. And I'm also interested, I swim at the pool, we skate at Lars, we hike, we bike, and so I've sort of reached a point in my mothering and my career where I have some space to give back to my own community, and admittedly with the outcome of the recent election, I feel that it is an opportune time for me to step up and really commit to my own community. I've spent a lot of time working in communities in my career first with JSI. It's a public health and healthcare consulting firm, and I've worked across the country to create opportunities for the use of scarce resources, to use them more effectively and efficiently to extend health and health programming to underserved communities. And then over the past 5 years, I've been working at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, as well as directing a health center controlled network. And I feel like I've gotten that sort of my feet on the ground firmly where I can branch out into other interests and work in my own community.
So your main interests in Park and Rec sounds like are on the recreation side, or?
Well, that's one piece. We've used the park piece quite a bit. We use it, the boys are also in Brookline Youth Baseball. They participated in Brookline Youth Soccer. We have also, we have a community garden plot at Lars that I got for my husband when the boys were 2 years old as a Father's Day gift, and we've made it a family activity and gradually worked our way up to bigger and sunnier plots, and he's built raised beds each time we've moved plots, so that's been exciting. We've done the sprinkler parks. We go to the Rose Garden playground. Sewell is, of course, very near and dear to us. We used to call it Choo-Choo Playground with the boys. And the other reason, obviously, as I outlined in my letter to you in my application, is that I'm very interested in the use of park and finding common ground, both literally and figuratively, for the benefit of all Brookline residents and meeting the needs of both the schools and the parks and open space and conservation, and working together to identify opportunities for that common good.
Right. As you know, one of the challenges before us is the expansion of our school system, specifically the ninth school and the high school. And the ninth school especially is the site abuts the school recreation center, and then the parking area. We've been working with Park and Rec to kind of craft what we hope is kind of a win-win. So can you talk about how you might view working with the schools, kind of coming up with a win? What might be the elements of a win-win?
So I think that it's got to be a collaborative process where there is a continuous dialogue. I am not, I don't have a silver bullet. I wish that I did, because I would certainly come here and propose it. But I think that there is a dialogue of give and take that needs to go on, where we have to prioritize a number of different elements to discuss those, and then to find ways where we can expand access to facilities, to parks, and potentially do a land swap. Some ideas, I won't go into places that I've thought through or thought of. But in addition to that, we also need to look at the ways that we are making these, this land accessible to walkability, to transportation, to kids getting there safely, to families getting there. I know that there's a big issue around the parking and the upper knoll and the wall. I've sort of heard it, much of it. And I think that really, quite honestly, the way that I've approached many of the problems where I've had to build collaborative decision making is really dialogue. And without knowing all the players involved, it's a little hard to specify exactly what my next step would be.
So you've got some professional expertise in trying to use scarce resources to appease, to help a number of people. One of the great things about Brookline is that we all feel some sense of ownership of our open space. And for members of the Park and Rec Commission, that results in sometimes contradictory appeals for the same limited piece of land. Just two examples are, there's been a long-standing desire among some members of the Brookline community to have a high-quality baseball facility with lights and, sort of a premier baseball field. And the other sort of big-ticket item that comes up occasionally when we do design review is a skate park, ramp and that sort of thing. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you would approach these sorts of contradictory and conflicting requests for space, and how you would tackle sort of maybe a departure, a pivot away from what the parks look like today to maybe what parks may need to look like 10 or 25 years in the future.
So the first part about sort of the conflicting elements, that's basically my daily existence at work. As I said, I manage a health center network, and sort of in the world of health centers, you've seen one health center, you've seen one health center, and they're all competing for resources, as well as the hospitals competing for resources. So I like to sort of take a step back from some of those pieces and really look at sort of some of the data. So try to make decisions based on, I've gotten I've worked to get, it's taken 3 years, but I've gotten competing hospitals to the table, and we're all collaborating with the Boston Public Health Commission to do a comprehensive community health needs assessment for the city of Boston. We are inviting additional stakeholders and community-based organizations, and we're going through right now, we wrote a grant and actually got funding intentionally not from the hospital so that we would not be biased. And we're going through a visioning and a mission and a value statement so that we will have those guiding principles and to go back to each time we try and make a decision. Maybe that exists currently. I didn't see anything in when I was sort of doing my review, but I think that also helps in informing the decisions that are made so that they're more transparent, and they're also based on expected sort of either results or guidelines. So that's one. And then, I'm sorry, I forgot your second part of the question.
Sort of the pivot from what parks look like today to what demand may require in the future.
So I think that there's a lot of movement towards accessibility, both sort of for the full continuum, so elders, for instance, and having benches and things that are sort of more walkable or accessible for those who are handicap accessible as well. You asked the question about mental health. I think that there also needs to be some, I don't want to say feng shui, but sort of some quiet places for people to go and reflect and be tranquil in the city as we build up and we've become more congested. I also think that they need to be accessible in the sense of, I look at where we are in South Brookline, and I have 11-year-old boys that are chomping at the bit to be independent, and our neighborhood is walkable within sort of a 5-block radius, but to try and send them anywhere else, they got to navigate some very major intersections, one of which resulted in a fatality, unfortunately, several months ago. Trying to get them to Lars, which would be great, they have to cross some major intersections that really, even when I'm crossing those intersections, I feel like at times I'm taking my life in my hands. So distracted children, or forgetting about even giving them a bicycle and putting them on a bike to go. So I think that there are ways that as we move and work together, not only with Park and Rec, but with DPW and other places, that we can make our parks that much more reachable and to meet the needs of sort of the changing demographic that has, as we age and as the demographics change within the town.
Okay. Well, I'll from the podium, I'll introduce you to our Public Health Director, Dr. Jett. You guys should talk to each other.
We've met through my through work.
Okay, good. Any other questions? We're not making any appointments tonight. This is a board, there are 3 slots. The incumbents have applied for reappointment, so just be aware of that. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I thank you for your time.
Question.
Sure.
That raises an issue that I'd like your comments on. Many of our boards have members that have been on forever. You would be a new face on this commission. What value is that? Persuade me that has value and exactly what that is.
So the new face.
I'm suggesting that it does have value. So
Okay, yeah. Persuade you why it has value, or persuade you that
confirm
it
my
does-
belief.
Confirm your belief. So I'm not a firm believer first of all, in competition. I really do believe that I keep saying common ground, but I really do feel that is to the betterment of community. That's been my experience. The same thing is also true, I feel, that just because it's always been done a certain way doesn't mean that that's the best way that it needs to continue doing. Things change, and sometimes you need to take a step back, look at what's happening, and breathe some fresh air and perspective, different perspective. It may not be better, but we should never be afraid of looking at things from a different vantage point, and bringing someone new in creates that opportunity. It creates the questions. It also creates, when you come to something new, you're asking questions simply because you need to get up to speed. You need to understand where you are. You need to understand what's been done. It would not be my intention, if I were lucky enough to be appointed to this commission, to go in with gangbusters and be disruptive. But I do think that, because I also know that I need to learn, and sometimes it's best to listen and keep your mouth shut in order to be able to learn what's happening and get the lay of the land. But I've, at risk of being a little political, which is not my way, I've sat back and watched the process play out on the 9th school, and it's part of why I feel like we need to take a look at what we're doing and come together as a town, because we're not installing a prison, right? We're putting in a school for the betterment of our kids, for the betterment of our tax dollars and our property values, and it's why people come to Brookline, and I feel unbelievably lucky to live in Brookline compared to many of the communities in which I work. And sometimes, though, I think that we need a new face and a new perspective to raise the bar and to have us all asking questions, not just the new person, but also when the new person asks a question, the person that's answering that question, maybe it gives them pause to think about what's happening.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Wow, okay. Moving on. The Override Study Committee. And we're not going to be approving the charge tonight, or?
No, I think the vision that Selectman Hamilton and I had was a version of this has been circulated to the board previously. This is an updated, revised version that's had some input from others, my colleagues here on the board included. We want to bring this up for another round of conversation, spark some debate, have all of you and others take a look at it and see if it's lacking in some places and could benefit from some additions or maybe even some subtractions. And then when we come back in September, I think maybe at our first meeting on September 5th, we'll bring the resulting document before the board and vote it through, and then in pretty quick succession make appointments. So I will editorialize a little bit and say that this is not, what you see in this charge is not a vast departure from charges of previous override study committees. It asks the committee to look at the long-range forecast and budget predictions to determine structural budget gaps that may exist, in this case in FY19 and in the years beyond. Asks the committee to take a look at school enrollment projections and the costs associated with enrollment growth, including operational costs for our now renovated devotion school, the forthcoming 9th elementary school and high school expansion. Assess the adoption and implementation of any efficiencies that we can identify, this override study committee can identify, and best practices, obviously to decrease the amount of ask that we may be making of the taxpayers in Brookline. Examine the potential for non-override revenue sources. Those are things like parking meter revenue, increased fees for recreation programs or other town services. Benchmark town and school programs, expenditures and revenues against our surrounding peer municipalities. And then compile some data about the impact that any increases in taxes, and fees would have on residents and taxpayers in town, and then take a look at programs, expansion, and expenditures to sort of prioritize what we may want to expand and do more of, and what we might be able to be more efficient about. And then, obviously, we want to also analyze the impact on town and school programs and expenditures of a failure of an override question, any override question that may get on the ballot in the future. I want to be pretty specific that this document, this charge, does not envision this override study committee taking a look at any of the debt exclusion, the capital requests that may be forthcoming, particularly around 9th Elementary School and high school expansion. There is a parallel process taking place through building committees, and then clearly this board is going to have to take up the question of whether to put a debt exclusion question or questions on the ballot. This override study committee is looking at an operational override, and clearly there's going to be some operational implications to an expansion of the high school or the construction of a 9th elementary school, startup costs, staffing, but the vision is not for this committee to re-engage about what the appropriate site for a 9th elementary school is, or whether the current plan for the high school expansion is the right one, or something else should be done.
Okay. Seems pretty comprehensive. Just my one fear, I think we've gone through the override study committee exercise, I think I want to say three times in the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was
23 years.
Yeah, there was one in the mid-'90s. We then
94.
Right, that was the original kind of establishment of the model, and then we did it again in 2008, and I was a part of that, and then we did it again 3 years ago.
Yep.
The exercise 3 years ago was a bit different than the exercise, say, in 2008. The exercise in 1994 kind of, the outcome of that set up a lot of the policies that we're still living with today. So the results of that committee have lived on and met the test of time. And even the 2008 committee, we're still living with the result. But the 2013 committee was different. In that committee did a deeper dive into the operations of both the town and the school than either the other committees. And I think what I'm hoping is you're going to be working off that foundation. You're not going to be redoing it. So the amount of work is probably going to be more comparable to the 2008 committee than it is to the 2013 committee. You have a good foundation from which to work from.
So I'll take that comment and make 3 points. First, I think you're absolutely right that this is a committee that's going to be built upon some of the work that's been done by previous override study committees and efficiency committees and various committees that have been appointed to take a look at the finances of the town. I think you are right in saying that the charge and the operations of this 2017 override study committee are really going to be built upon the outstanding work that was done, the modeling that was done by the 2013 override study committee. So not going to be a 18-month long examination top to bottom of the town's finances. The second point I'll make is partly because this is going to be a committee really built upon the work of the 2013 override study committee, again in addition to B-Space and the 2008 override study committee and the 2009 efficiency committee and so on and so forth. It's going to be a smaller committee. We're not going to have 17, 19 people on it. The current conception is for 7 to 9 individuals. And then the third point I'll make is we are accepting applications. So anybody who is intrigued by this conversation is encouraged to apply and bring their opinions, their skill set, their knowledge to the table. And again, the timeline here is we're accepting applications up to the end of the month, and then the anticipation is that this board is going to take some action in early September to interview and appoint members so this committee can start to do its work.
Feel free to share online.
Any other discussion? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll renew my request for comments and revisions from anybody who's listening, and this will come back in early September for review and for discussion.
And we'll probably post this version online so people can, as you said, can contribute in that manner.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Selectman Franco. The next item is marijuana. The governor, a couple of weeks ago, signed the new marijuana law, and this is going to affect not only the town of Brookline, but other communities in the Commonwealth, and we're anticipating having some dispensaries here. Is that the right word? Well, it's the medical side, it's dispensaries, retail outlets. So, Mr. Kleckner.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is really the first opportunity that we've had to formally address the board on the new law, and the new law is pretty new, although the referendum passed over a year ago. I think everybody knew that the legislature was likely to, if not tweak it, amend it somewhat significantly, and I think they have to some degree. So we're here tonight to really just summarize. We're still learning. It's a very extensive rewrite of the law, but we're happy to give you a summary this evening, answer questions. And I'll introduce the department heads who've been working with me on this, and also give you a heads up on what we think the scope of questions this town needs to deal with and when. So we have a staff working group that's been following this for a long time, and two of the members are here, but Patricia Correa is our lead associate town council, who's been very extensively involved, and with me this evening are Allison Steinfeld, our planning director, Dr. Swanee Jett, and also Kara, Patty is here. Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't see you. There's a number of other staff members that I'm afraid to announce all of them because I'll miss a few, but we have had a lot of staff involvement in this, and it's a very complicated law and a complicated set of issues, as I'm sure you know. It's really breaking new ground in this country. So to summarize the new law, licensing will no longer be in your court. Currently, previously you had the responsibility to license medical marijuana. You will no longer have that authority. Both recreational and medical facilities from here on out will be licensed by the state. 5-member Cannabis Control Commission that will be appointed by, I believe it's the governor, the state treasurer, and the attorney general. Now, that doesn't mean to say that cities and towns won't be involved to create some regulation, but the licensing, I want to be clear, you will have no say in specific stores or establishments. Previously, medical marijuana dispensaries were under the general direction of the State Department of Public Health. They will no longer be under that jurisdiction. They will be under the Cannabis Control Commission as well. So both recreational and medical will be under this 5-member state agency. The new law does permit cities and towns to have a say, however, and in the case of the town of Brookline, our voters could vote to prevent or preclude the sale of marijuana or limit it at the referendum. That's an option that cities and towns have. There was a lot of discussion about this dual nature. If voters in your community voted for the referendum a couple of years ago, it has to go back to the voters. If they if the voters rejected the petition, even though it passed statewide, then for a period of time, your local legislative body or a town meeting or a city council could have some jurisdiction. That's not the case in Brookline because Brookline overwhelmingly voted to support the referendum last year. Let's see, the law does give priority to existing medical marijuana facilities to convert to recreational. We're still trying to sort that out a little bit, but it's pretty clear that the legislation gave priority to existing medical marijuana dispensaries, and as you well know, we had one of the firsts in the state with Netta here in Brookline Village. The law does give the town, it sort of grandfathers some of the regulations and licensing conditions that we had on the existing facility. So if a facility was here on July 1st, then any licensing conditions and regulations appear to be of the city or town appear to be effective. Although, this is a law that's waiting for some dispute and analysis and litigation and other things. Unfortunately, I'm sure. Let's see. The law now levies state sales tax on the sale of recreational marijuana. Medical marijuana will continue to be tax exempt, and it allows cities and towns to add on up to 3% tax on the sale of recreational marijuana under its borders. So that's a discretionary matter.
That's a town meeting vote?
Yes, I believe so. If
That's-
you wanted to levy up to 3% sales tax, that's a town meeting vote?
Yes, it's a town meeting.
Town meeting vote. So the only thing that's a referendum to the voters is whether you want to prevent or limit the sale altogether. Right now, the default is that you can have up to 20% of the number of package stores, liquor package stores that you have in the community. For us, that's about 20% of that is 5. So we can have up to 5.
So we can have 5 marijuana retailers.
Correct. And the voters could limit that further. The voters could limit it or prevent it altogether. And some communities have already done that, believe it or not. And I'm going to give you some chance to ask questions because it is really complicated. So this law would potentially have licenses issued within a year from now. So we do need to act expeditiously, although we are not recommending that we take any action this fall. We think it's too premature, and we do have our zoning moratorium in place. Excuse me. So the things that we think the town needs to consider is, should we submit a referendum to the voters? Do we ask the voters if they want to limit the sale? That can be done at any election. The town could call a special election. You could have it at your annual election. You could have it at a state election. There's no limit as to when and what kind of election you can ask the voters to weigh in on this. We need to pass zoning. It's not totally clear the extent to which we can pass zoning because the law does say, unless the voters say so, you cannot, town meeting cannot unduly restrict the ability for marijuana sales to take place. So we have to be very careful about our zoning, but we intend to tackle that. And we could pass general bylaws also, for example, hours of operation, things like that. And then finally, we have to determine the sales tax, which you already pointed out as a town meeting vote. So we're looking at the spring at the annual town meeting to deal with all these issues. We have our moratorium in place, so we're not worried, and the new sales can't happen before June 1st of next year anyway. So So we think the spring will be a sufficient time to deal with it. We don't think we have all the answers, and we'd rather not take it piecemeal this fall. So with that, we think that the board, who has a licensing committee, which is chaired by two of the selectmen, Selectman Franco and Green, are on that licensing committee, will have a lot to say and sort of formulate policy for the board's consideration, and also the planning board, which will be heavily involved in the zoning matters, needs to get to work. So we suggest that the board encourage and authorize that activity. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions to the extent we can. I'm glad to see Patty, because I was very scared about answering legal questions because there are so many of them.
So a licensee gets a state license and then decides they want to locate in Brookline. The only control we would have is through zoning. So they would locate a location, apply for some kind of permit, which would then go to the ZBA eventually?
So the zoning scheme is to be worked out, whether there will be a special permit requirement. I would say I think it's a gray area. I think we can be somewhat optimistic that the scheme we have in place now for the licensing of medical marijuana facilities will continue under the grandfathering
Of that
language
facility?
in the law.
Of that one facility?
No, the way the language is written in the law is that it grandfathers restrictions or limitations on the operation of medical marijuana treatment centers, marijuana establishments, are both imposed by a municipality. So, it's not crystal clear language still. There's a question as to whether the restrictions, if they're in a bylaw or general regulation, are still effective, and we do have a licensing scheme. So, we're going to need to do some legislative research. There's some questions to be answered here. But some of the things that can be done under the new law are time, place, or manner restrictions, which could include zoning. They could include a general bylaw, on manner of operations, perhaps from a public health perspective. The state is going to be issuing its regulations by March 15th, and the law, as amended, has pages and pages of types of regulations that have to be issued by the state. So I would think that the state regulations are going to be very comprehensive. Perhaps they'll use the existing DPH regulations as a model, which are also very extensive, and perhaps they'll even go further because there's more experience now with retail establishments from Colorado and Washington and the growing number of states that are embarking on this. So there may not be a feeling that there's a great need by the town to regulate further beyond the state. We have to wait and see what the state does, and the licensing review committee will no doubt be beginning a discussion of these kinds of topics. So there could be general bylaws, there could be zoning bylaws. There is a buffer zone written into the law that isn't very negotiable. It's different than the medical marijuana law.
What is it? Is it 500 around school?
K through 12.
K through 12.
K through 12, which can be reduced but not increased by local regulation. So it can be relaxed but not made more strict.
I'd be curious to see a map with the circles around the schools, 500 feet, and then a zoning map to see, where's the intersection of our, say, G districts. Because currently, the medical is only in G districts, right? It's currently only, the medical marijuana is only currently in G districts more than 1,000 feet?
No, it's
We're
what we
500?
did. So the medical marijuana law doesn't have a buffer zone. The medical marijuana regulations by DPH have a buffer zone that says 500 feet from daycare, places where children congregate.
Okay,
and
so that's why
K through
we only
12.
have like 3 places in town.
And so the state regulations permitted municipalities to create their own buffer zones, in which case the state one fell away. So what
Right.
Brookline chose to do is map out where we could place a medical marijuana facility under the DPH regulation. And as you say, there was virtually no place to put one. And so we relaxed the 500 feet from daycare centers, and we eliminated where children congregate. So our regulations don't permit a medical marijuana facility to be in the same building as a daycare center. And not, so we relaxed it somewhat. With retail marijuana establishments, it's just 500 feet from K through 12 period, unless we relax that to 200 or 100 or something
But it
smaller.
doesn't.
Wow, you read my mind,
doesn't
Kara.
prevent- If 500 feet doesn't cover daycare centers.
No, K through 12.
So, taking the existence of NETA, our current, that is, as I recall, next to a daycare center. So that's not a problem if they decide to do they decide to do retail marijuana.
Yes, daycare
How close
centers
is
are
it
not
to the
covered.
Lincoln School?
I think
I've
it's more than
forgotten.
500 feet. Would you like to?
No, it's demonstrated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's more than 5. Where Netta is outside the circle. It's in the green area. The map is a little hard to read, but it looks like the intersection of Harvard and Boylston is out. It's a G district outside of the 500 feet. So
I think our challenge will be to determine what grandfathering we have for medical, and also to what extent we can create a zoning bylaw that gives the town some discretion, for example, a special permitting process which doesn't prevent land use, but looks at specific things like traffic and parking and so on. So those seem to be the areas where there's most uncertainty but have the most impact on a city or town's ability to regulate.
Does it say how long the licenses are good for?
No, I don't believe so, but it does, one thing it does say is that an establishment, whether it's medical or recreational, must enter into an agreement with the city or town that talks about roles and responsibilities, and it does contemplate that a city or town could, for a period of 5 years, levy a fee. This is separate from the tax, but levy a fee, an impact fee, if you will. So you know that we have a host community agreement with NETA currently. I think that's what I think is contemplated by these, although it appears that they can only last for 5 years. That's the way I read it.
So this agreement wouldn't be a license. It's just
not a license.
kind of an operational
Yeah, I don't know
agreement.
how it's referred to in a law pad.
That was a good description. I would characterize it similarly. It goes to operations. And as Mr. Kleckner said, there can be an impact fee, which has to be related to actual costs that result.
Right.
So the fact that we're not in charge of licensing means that we're not looking at things like parking and hours of operation.
No, I don't think that's true. I think that we can look at land use through zoning measures and perhaps a special permit scheme. And I think we can look at hours, for example, through this agreement that the entity would have to have with us, and also possibly through a general bylaw, because the law permits general bylaws on time, place, or manner kind of restrictions, so that would be in that nature.
So we wouldn't be doing the stings on the marijuana side that we do on the alcohol side.
We would not be doing inspections. We would not have that jurisdiction. I mean, there's some good news on the state side. It's a much more extensive scheme now. And as one example, they'll be running fingerprint-based background checks on certain personnel, which is what we have in our existing medical marijuana scheme, but which the state had not been doing through DPH.
So you actually, you brought up an interesting point. So our health department will have no jurisdiction to go in and do anything, or?
Yeah, this is not a DPH, this is not a health scheme. This is its own standalone cannabis control commission scheme.
Yeah, okay.
And so, of course, any entity is subject to civil and criminal law and has to abide by it. And of course, we have recourse in some situations, but we don't have inspectional authority under this law, for example.
I do expect that the state will be very heavily involved in public health aspects of marijuana, including packaging and, the doses and things like that. I don't know, Swanee, if you have any thoughts about that, but it will be at the state level.
Good evening. So one of the things that, I had opportunity to look at was what Colorado did. So we sort of copied some of the same premise. And so I'm thinking we would be heavily instituted, like if there was an outbreak, looking at certifications for food handlers just in case, because they'll be making edibles. So I think we need to be looking at that aspect. And also there was funding put in place to make sure that there was public health awareness campaign and substance abuse prevention campaigns. So, I'm just waiting for, what the regulations might say and making sure that we have a part in that process.
I'm wondering if the now approved law counteracts or overrides some of our local restrictions around e-cigarettes, for example. So I can imagine a situation where there's a dispensary that is producing a product that plugs into an e-cigarette. We've got some existing regulations in town about where e-cigarettes can be sold and how they can be displayed. Is that all overrode by the law, or is that sort of a gray area that's going to be explored?
So I guess that these retailers will be selling marijuana, and I don't think they'll be selling accessories. I think that's a separate kind of a product that maybe isn't subject to licensing. It's not entirely clear. Some of this we have to wait and see in terms of how the regulations read that come out. But as I've read the statute, I don't believe accessories is subject to state licensing. And so I will have to see, but I think that we could continue to regulate those separate entities. They're not regulated. I don't think they would be regulated by the state.
So there's a potential,
Yes.
Just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. There's the potential that to the extent that accessories are sold, we can regulate or inspect a portion of the business, and a portion would be responsible for the state, it would be the responsibility of the state to oversee.
Again, it appears so, but we have to see how the regulations read, because we can't cross the line into regulating, what's already taken by the state for comprehensive regulation. So there's a line there. So we just have to see how the regulations read. But I think that may end up being the case.
Does this law contemplate that businesses, package stores and convenience stores will be able to sell on a retail basis, will be able to sell marijuana, or is it only for specialized businesses?
There isn't any indication in the law that it's just for specialized businesses, but again, we'll have to see how the regulations read. So any There are certain guidelines on who can apply for a license, and I don't recall any regulation of that sort of a topic.
I do think that you see that there is a priority given to medical marijuana dispensaries, because I think there has been, some operation there and some experience. So that's why the state has given priority to medical marijuana dispensaries to convert. But Patty's right, I didn't see anything else. My guess is that alcohol could be viewed as a better place, because currently, it's only sold to people of a certain age, which is the same age that the law regulates marijuana. But it's hard to say, and I'm not really sure. I will just mention that there is also a cannabis advisory committee, and you may have seen that had to be nominated by August 1st, a few days ago, and that's a big committee. It's about a 25-member committee. This is all volunteer. I happen to know that former Health Director Alan Balsam is on that.
Right.
Was appointed by the State Treasurer. The MMA President has a seat on that, which I am currently the MMA President, because my term only goes from year to year, we're going to designate another person to do that throughout. A town manager in another community is going to serve on that. So I think they will have some involvement and some help. I think cities and towns will have a voice there, but ultimately it's a 5-member commission, similar. I think it was created similar to the Gaming Commission. It'll operate similar like that.
I assume the state is going to regulate strength of these products as well as purity.
That's my understanding.
Is the Cannabis Control Commission going to be overseeing that, or how's that going to work?
Yes.
Are they going to have the facilities to do that, or?
That's my understanding, yep.
Yes.
Yes. And, the funding is a big issue, and I've heard the governor say that, whatever it takes, they'll put it in place. But right now, they've got to move quickly, because these licenses could be issued, in less than a year. But the answer is yes, Bernard. I think the Cannabis Control Commission is in charge of all of that.
So they're going to have a huge overlapping testing bureaucracy, overlapping the Department of Health and local health departments, or?
No, the law eliminates DPH oversight of marijuana and puts it all within the Cannabis Control.
But DPH does regulate purity issues and strength issues with respect to other products. So that's what I meant by overlapping.
Okay.
We know we won't get the FDA's involvement, because, the interesting thing about all this is that it still remains a illegal product under federal law, and the current administration is making a lot of noise about coming down on states, this grant experiment that's going on.
Yeah.
In Brookline, we've spent a lot of time and energy on trying to regulate tobacco and curtail tobacco use. It's because of its dangerous health effects. And I'm wondering whether there's anything in the law which would discourage smoking of marijuana. I mean, there are other ways to get the substance into yourself, eating it and so forth, or tinctures, putting things under your tongue. But it seems to me that the smoking, and I remember Alan Balsam once saying to us, look, anything you inhale is bad for you, most likely. And so, again, it makes me nervous that we're going to have an industry which promotes something that could be very dangerous, bad for your health.
I think we still can approach this like we did with tobacco. So there would not be any public consumption. So now how we enforce that, that's something else that we probably need to be able to address. And also being able to do compliance checks to make sure they don't sell to anybody under the age of 21 could also be an issue. But the education piece is highly important in making sure we enforce the same laws as we do with tobacco.
So I think that the plan that was articulated by the staff working group is right, that we don't do anything in the fall, that we wait until the spring. I think the fact that we've got this moratorium until at least, I think, December of 2018, with the possibility for extension, gives me a little bit of confidence that we have some time to work through some of these issues. But I know that the licensing committee that Selectman Green and I chair is starting to think about dealing with some of these issues. We're, I think, trading emails about a September meeting to dig in on the work, and I know the planning board is starting to think about it as well. So the wheels of government are turning, and hopefully we'll have some more answers over the next couple of months as the regulations come out, and there are some probing questions asked of the various state agencies that are recently created or newly empowered.
Yeah, we're getting into high gear now.
It's not a token conversation.
Oh.
Every one of them.
Okay. This is starting to degenerate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So now we're talking about warrant articles for the fall town meeting. And the warrant closes August 31. We already know of 2 citizen petitions that have come to us. One is, well, both of them pertain to naming of this board. One of them would rename this board to the Board of Selectwomen.
Go for it.
And the other one would be what? Board of Select Board or something?
Select board.
I don't know. So I guess we'll be debating those weighty issues.
So these are 2 that haven't filed already?
They have been filed,
And
but citizen.
they could still be pulled, I mean, not until the warrant closes are they officially considered.
So Ms. Goff.
So this is just an opportunity for the board members to inform your colleagues of any potential warrant articles that you would like to have sponsored by the Board of Selectmen. This is aside from the articles that we file on your behalf, like budget amendments and unpaid bills. You should have in your packet a draft of a potential warrant article related to Hancock Village. This is a series of warrant articles that are being worked on by staff surrounding the negotiations with Chestnut Hill Realty. And I think that they probably won't be finalized until closer to the warrant closing. But this is to provide notice to the board if there are any questions or concerns that other members might have. In addition, there are some other warrant articles that are being filed by coming out of selectmen committees. The Senior Tax Work-Off Committee has potentially 3 articles that we're anticipating will be filed. In addition, the License Review Committee has been working on a warrant article that actually the board will file. My memo said that it was coming from the committee, but Ben and Patty Carrere informed me that they would like the Board of Selectmen to file it, petitioning the legislature to expand the number of liquor licenses in town. So in your packet, you should have some materials related to those warrant articles. And if there are any questions, concerns, or any other warrant articles that I may not have heard of that you're thinking about, now is the time to talk about it.
I'll just mention Hancock Village there's going to be a bunch of warrant articles relating to Hancock Village. So the first is the zoning, and that's quite complex. And we're trying to make sure that the concept of one and done and the notion that what we've agreed to in the memorandum of agreement as illustrated by the map is exactly what we're getting. And then so that's quite complex, and that's probably, in terms of the specific language, that's probably the furthest one along. And there's a draft of it in our packets as it exists today, but there's still some sections that are being discussed. Then there'll be a master development agreement, and we've done these development agreements in some other projects such as River Road, Brookline Place. I believe we did it. We did one in Fisher Hill some years ago. And the warrant article will actually be quite simple. It'll just authorize the selectmen to sign on the town's behalf a development agreement, and then at some point during the town meeting vetting process, the development agreement would be made public. That typically has happened later in the process. They tend not to be ready by the time the warrant closes, and that's the way it happened with River Road and Brookline Place, the ones that I was involved with. And then there's the Hancock Village Neighborhood Conservation District. In our packet, it says repeal of, and that's what we've been thinking about, but that's currently under discussion, whether it will be repealed, whether it will be modified. The concept, as I said earlier, that we were thinking about when drafting the memorandum of agreement was that similar to the tax test, where tax test has a threshold above which the NCD is invoked, below which the NCD is not invoked, and basically it would be invoked if they were violating the MOA. That was kind of the concept that we were thinking about when the agreement was drafted. And then as we were getting into the zoning and trying to figure out exactly, what would that NCD look like, we were having trouble kind of crafting the legal language to come up with that threshold. So we went in the other direction and tried to enforce it through zoning because we were having trouble coming up with the legal language. I understand some folks in the neighborhood aren't happy with that approach, and they're making an attempt to craft what an NCD might look like. So that's currently something that's up to discussion. Then there'll be a warrant article on the acceptance of the real estate, the green space that would be deeded to the town. There'll be some easements, and then the deed restriction. Is that a warrant article? Come up to the microphone, Jonathan.
I believe it would be, because the town will be the responsible for enforcing the restriction if it ever comes to that. So it represents interest in the real estate.
So we're looking at potentially 6 warrant articles to enforce this agreement.
But Sandy might take them together.
Well, the debate will probably be together, but it's 6 warrant articles, some of which will require a majority vote. The zoning, of course, would require the zoning, the acceptance of the real estate, and the easements would be a 2/3.
Based on the reasoning that, as you said, the easements, the acceptance of the park, as well as the deed restriction, all represent acquisitions of an interest in real estate. They all would require 2/3.
Right. So everything except the NCD and the development agreement. Okay, that's been an interesting adventure, Hancock Village.
Well worth the $3,500 stipend that you get.
Right.
I will briefly tell all of you about these 3 articles that the senior tax committee is going to ask the board to file. They are not nearly as complex as the ones that our chair just went over, but they involve tax policy, so there's some degree of complexity. The first will be a proposal to decrease the interest rate the tax deferment program. This is something that we've taken up before. It's currently at 5%. The committee is 5% fixed rate, excuse me. The committee is kicking around the idea of doing a variable rate tied to the average prime rate over the previous 12 months. So it would adjust every year. The second article would be actually special legislation going to the legislature in seeking a change to the income limit for that tax deferment program. Currently, it is tied to the income limit for the state level tax circuit breaker law. That is currently, I believe, $57,000, which precludes some people in Brookline that may benefit from it. So not something that we can fix at town meeting. We'd have to go to the legislature and go to an additional step, but a conversation we want to start with the legislature. And then the third is actually pretty straightforward. It would be a proposal to place a checkbox on the annual real estate tax bill, which would allow residents to contribute a sum of money, whether it be $1 or $1,000, towards programs that would benefit both elderly and disabled residents of the town that would pay property tax.
Oh, we can do that?
We can do that. Some of our peer communities have done it. The city of Newton has a checkbox. I don't want anybody to be under the illusion that it's going to solve any problem. We're not going to have millions of dollars rolling in, but it's some of money that will be collected over the course of a year, and the article would also create a committee that would oversee the expenditure of those funds. So another tool in the toolbox that certainly can't hurt. So those are the three articles that are going to go before town meeting. Details are sort of being worked out, as you can imagine, but that's certainly the general theme of what we're going for.
Do you know how successful Newton's program has been? I mean, do they bring in any money?
They did bring in some money. I don't know what the dollar figure is off the top of my head, mostly because the hour is late. But it's it was tens of thousands of dollars in a year, which again, based on the size of the average property tax bill in Brookline, only goes so far. But it's again some money that we can contribute, and it certainly would be a demonstration of commitment and priorities for the town.
Is this available only for senior tax relief? For example, could be used for affordable housing?
It could be used for senior and disabled taxpayers.
Okay.
I do remember a number of years ago when I was chairing the Personnel Committee of the Advisory Committee, we had a number of, we looked at some articles that would deal with this, and Gary McCabe came and talked to us about it. And he had investigated Newton, and I believe it was also our former finance director, Steve Cirillo. Mm-hmm. And what surprised them was that Newton's program, while very similar to Brookline's, was far more successful. Yeah. And in the discussions that they had with seniors who came into the office to inquire about this, the thing that seemed to bother people was that the estates would, I mean, the way the deferral program works is you don't pay the tax in, but when you either sell the property or it goes to your estate when you pass on, that's when the bill gets paid, and seniors seem to be concerned about that. But, I mean, if you're not going to make them pay it right away, there's really no other way to have them pay the tax. So, but, you know, I think that one of the things that they were thinking was that education of our seniors would be important, because Brookline properties are going up and up and up in price, and people are wanting to buy here, and so it's a pretty good deal. Currently, I think the rate of increase of the value of property is more than 3% a year, if that's the number we ended up picking, for instance, so that it would be a good deal for seniors who...
I think it's natural for everybody to want to pass on as much as possible to your heirs, in the sense that you're taking money literally out of their pockets and leaving them with a burden turns some people off. And these 3 warrant articles that we're talking about is our start. There's some additional things that we'll propose, but this is going to be a problem that we're going to have to return to over the course of probably several years and make tweaks till we sort of crack the code to some extent.
Any other warrant articles? I think it's going to be a busy town meeting. Okay, thank you. So last item on the agenda is we have a few appointments here.
Mr. Chairman, we have 4 boards and committees that
Actually,
we're...
3.
3 we're not dealing with, which one? The economic, that's right, because we weren't able to make that interview this evening. So we have 3 boards and committees that we feel are ready for the board's consideration tonight. The first, the Board of Assessors. We have 1 applicant. It's the current Vice Chair of the committee, Mr. Peterson, who you earlier met with, and he is seeking reappointment, and there are no other applicants. So I will call out the name of Harold Peterson.
Aye.
The next is the Neighborhood Conservation District Commission, NCDC, and in this case, we have Mr. Allen, who is interested in being elevated from an alternate member. There is 1 vacancy, and that will expire in 2020. So I will call, and there are no other applicants at this time, so I will call the name of Mark Allen.
Aye.
Okay, and the final committee, the Advisory Council on Public Health, which you just recently appointed Peter Moyer. There is a vacancy with Ms. Krakau's not seeking reappointment, and so that will...
Dr. Moyer. We
That
didn't
would be
appoint Dr. Moyer.
Peter Moyer. So call out the name of Peter Moyer.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and that concludes our business for tonight, August 8th. Next meeting is after Labor Day.
Day after.